As a young girl, I loved fire trucks. My grandfather was the chief of the Lafayette Fire Department at Station 12, so I always had the opportunity to go see the trucks and sit in the front seat. My mom tells me stories of 5-year-old me, dressed in my purple fairy outfit that I donned regularly, excitedly squirming in the car as we drove to go see my pawpaw. After my father's first suicide attempt, however, I began fearing fire trucks. Gone were the days of ecstatic me begging my mom to bring me to see the trucks. Everything had changed. My name is Elise Lauren Gibson. I have lived a life of sexual abuse, mental illness, and addiction. I am a survivor. This is my story of survival. Fire trucks symbolize safety to me. The men and women who rode in them saved lives and took kittens out of trees. They were an escape. Earlier that year, I had been sexually assaulted by a male cousin and was forbade to speak a word about it. I was locked in a closet for over an hour, and once released, I was forced to eat a mothball by him and 2 other cousins. I ran down the dusty family road, tears in my eyes, to my paternal grandmother's house at the front end. I sobbed as I told them I ate a mothball, completely concealing what Charles had done to me. To this day, hearing the name Charlie still brings a faint taste of mothballs to my mouth. I never spoke of this incident until the age of 13, when I finally confided in a boyfriend. But my mother was distraught twofold. I had been molested at the age of 6 by another male cousin, Zach, which was brought to light minutes after its occurrence. I was coerced, told we were playing a game of beauty pageant. What followed was anything but innocent, as I was cut by his fingernails and cried, running to my mother and telling her what happened in the best way that an inconsolable 6-year-old could manage. The revelation of the molestation at 5 years old tore open any scars that had healed over the 7 years that had passed, brought back feelings of rage that only a mother could have, and ultimately tore my family apart. My father had always struggled with mental illness, but in the spring of 2014, everything took a turn for the worst. He had lost his leg 2 years prior in a motorcycle accident and suffered irreversible brain damage. He was diagnosed with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and succumbed to the darkness that lurked inside of him. My mom and I fled in April and lived just the 2 of us with 2 kitties. She never filed divorce papers, never kept me from him. She went as far as to cook meals for him, and even with a restraining order in place, she went to him. She brought him hot meals and made sure he was okay. I, however, was not as pleasant with the whole ordeal. I was an angry, emotional teenager who hated the world. Dad would call, I wouldn't answer. He would text, I would wait hours before sending a 1-word reply. I don't know why I was so cold, so angry. Maybe I felt the need to send him the hatred that my mom couldn't bear to give. In our absence, Dad spent more time with his family, reconnecting with the brothers and sisters he had left in 2009. He drank and smoked cigars with them, indulging in his free time. The happiness faded, though, and in a drunken rage, he punched Charlie. Charges were pressed, and my father had to deal with court and legal fees, all the while trying to get Social Security for his disability. On December 3rd, 2014, I received a text from my father, Warren John Romero, stating that I would be receiving a birthday present from him, but not a Christmas present. I knew that ever since my mom and I had left in April of that year, he had struggled financially, so I brushed it off as him not having the money to get both. I told him that it was okay. I said, "I love you, Daddy." When I woke up at 5 a.m. the next morning, I was yanked into the realization that those were the last words I would ever say to my dad. I was woken up by my mother, and she held me while she cried. I asked her if it was Dad, if something had happened to him. She said yes, he took his life last night. I walked into the living room, which was now occupied by my brother Andrew, my grandmother and grandfather, and my Aunt Penny. I didn't cry, I didn't break down. I simply sat on the couch and cuddled my cat Nala, as everyone sat in silence. I asked if I could go to school, not knowing how to deal with the grief, and was quickly met with no's and you need to stay home. Sitting on that couch, blankly staring ahead, I replayed that last short conversation with my dad in my head, analyzing every letter, every syllable, and word piece by piece. I scrambled to find out what I did wrong. I would soon find out that I was not the only one searching for answers in text messages. My mother, Lori Romero Gibson, was at the main stage of the event and had a front row seat in the audience of my father's final show. His last words to her? Call a hearse. Was it the stress? Was it the mental illness? Was it the loss of his girls, as he called my mom and me? I ask these questions to this day. They keep me up when I try to sleep. They slam the door when I attempt to shove them in a closet. No one tells you what to expect when your dad kills himself. No one warns you of the sleepless nights, the lack of appetite, or the tears that fall with the intensity of a water hose. And no one tells you that if it can get worse, it will get worse. In March of 2015, it certainly did get worse. While at a robotics meeting at school, I sat in the computer lab with someone who I thought was a friend. I was working on a fundraiser for our upcoming competition, 3D printing trinkets to sell. He knew what happened with my father and essentially preyed on my vulnerability. That night, I was orally raped. I bit in self-defense and walked off. I didn't speak of it until the following Monday, when I was escorted to the assistant principal's office and made aware that they knew. I was treated as a harlot and told that I must have done something to lead him on. They told me that Alexander and his friend Jude both swore that it was consensual, and that I was to be placed on an academic suspension until they investigated. I had to leave behind all of my success. I was a budding artist, a brilliant student. After Dad's death, school was the only bit of normal that remained, and they took it from me. Eventually, Alexander was found guilty of statutory rape, as he was 18 and I was 15. It was never consensual in the first place. They argued that I never said no, to which I stated, "How can you say no with a dick in your mouth?" I went back to school, but I was a shred of the human that I used to be. I became mediocre, trading art for TV, studying for sleep, healing for more pain. I bounced between homeschooling and public school for the remainder of high school. I had all of this emotional turmoil bottled up inside of me. Rage, depression, confusion. In 2017, a new emotion came forth, one that almost cost me my life. Apathy. My father had struggled with alcoholism all his life, as did his father before him. I never thought that I, a survivor of so many awful things, would succumb to the same pressure. But I did. I began stealing alcohol from my mother and stepfather, binge drinking and slacking on everything. I isolated and became toxic. One September night, I hit rock bottom, stealing Crown Royal and absinthe to numb the pain that exponentially grew inside. My grandmother found me on the floor, naked, with a gash in my lip that I had cut with scissors to rid of the jagged edge. I could have died that night. I should have died that night. Alas, I have the heart and soul of a survivor. Since that night, I have rid myself of the title of victim. For years, I wallowed in the pain and suffering so much, it began to feel like home. I did not want to change because change was scary. After that night, I went to a treatment center that specializes in trauma work for survivors of sexual abuse, River Oaks Behavioral Facility in New Orleans, Louisiana. I found solace in sharing tears with other women that knew the pain that I felt, that grew to accept the pain as synonymous with themselves. I graduated high school cum laude and am now a student of University of Louisiana at Lafayette. I am a chemical engineering major and have plans to grow organs from one's own stem cells in hopes of changing the world. I work with the National Alliance of Mental Illness and wear my diagnoses of OCD, PTSD, and depression on my sleeve. I still struggle and will continue to struggle. Grief does not end. You simply learn how to live with it. You simply learn to use your grief to your advantage. Once, I was a human who did not know how to look at myself. I had no idea what introspection was. Now, I see a therapist every other week and am so much more open with my own emotions. I am no longer a victim. Gone are the days of wallowing in self-pity. Today, as I record this, it is December 3rd, 2018, which marks Today, December 3rd, 2018, I rename myself a survivor.